Hello, first-time coders. The objective of today's lab is to understand while loops. In our previous lab, we studied for loops, and we said that for loops are loops you use when you know precisely when to start and when to stop the loop. But this is not the case all the time. Sometimes you just have a condition to work with. For example, let's say you went to the fuel station. The fuel attendant asked you, "How much fuel do you want?" And you replied, "Full tank, please." In this case, the fuel attendant doesn't know precisely when to stop filling the tank. So he keeps filling the tank in a loop until the tank is full to the brim. This is an example of a while loop. So what do we need to start a while loop? Well, for starters, we need the word while as our keyword. Then we have the condition. This condition here must be true for the while loop to continue. As soon as the condition is false, the while loop is exited. So then we have the columns, just like in the if statement and the for loop, that tells us that this is the end of the statement for the while loop. Then you go down into the while loop, and as always you need to indent a space or two or a tab to tell the computer that whatever is indented is part of the code. So here is where you write your code. For example, something like this. Now, one of the most important things you should keep in mind is that within the condition here, you should always have, within the loop, you should always have something that changes in relation to the condition, so that at some point in the loop you can go out. If the condition is not modified within the while loop, then that means the while loop will continue running in perpetuity. So let's see how we can do this in code. So we start with the keyword while, and then we can have a condition. So what we can do is we can come here and have a variable, let's say x equals 0 or x equals 1, and we can say inside the while loop that if x is less than 6, let's just continue with the loop. So inside we can print x. Now if we leave the code in this way, x is not really changing, so the condition is not changing, and that means the loop will continue forever. So if you run this, the loop will never stop unless we force the computer to stop the code. This is not what we want. So what we can do is we can add a condition, we can update the value of x here. For example, we can say increase x by 1. And then if we run this code now, you can see that at the end of the while loop at line 4, it increases by 1, and then we go back into the value for x, and then we check if the condition is not true, then we go back into the while loop until the condition is false. So when Python enters the while loop, it already has collected the value x equal to 1. Indeed, x is less than 6, so it enters into the loop. and then it prints x, it gets x equal to x plus 1, now x is 2. Then it tries to go out, but it can't go out because x is still less than 6. Then it goes back into the loop, print x, increase x by 1, and this will continue until we reach x equal to 6. When we reach x equal to 6, then Python can go out of the while loop and continue with the remaining part of the code. Let's try our hands on some code. Let's say we want to write a Python code that calculates an average of scores in a class. We want the code to stop collecting input once a negative number is given by the user. So let's say score is equal to, and then we can say input, enter a student's score. Then we can say, all right, our sum is equal to, so we cannot use the keyword sum because it's a keyword in Python. What we can do is we can either make this a capital letter, or we can keep it in small letter and we can add an underscore at the beginning or at the end. So we add all our numbers here. We can initialize sum to 0 because we want to add the inputs into it and then later calculate the average. Then we need the count of the number of people should also start from 0. So the problem is the score is float, so we have to change this to float. Okay. Now we can enter our while loop, so we can say while. So what we do is whatever is in the right hand side will get the value inside the variable, and we add it with the score, and then we save it in whatever is in the left hand side. In this case, it's the same variable, so the previous value will be added with the score, and then the new summation will be overwritten on the previous score. And then we can use the same idea to increase the count. Okay, so now if you run this code this way, score doesn't change at all. This means this loop will continuously run. This is not what we want. We want at the end of the loop, we want to update the value like this. So now that we have this input, so let's see what the code will do. We get an input from the user, we initialize our sum and the count, and then we enter into the score. So if the score is greater than or equal to 0, we get the sum. Alright, then we increase our count by 1, and then we get a new input. Since the score is changing after every iteration, that means whenever the user inputs a value, once we go back into the condition in the while loop, we will be able to exit the loop. So when we come out of the loop, then we can do our simple calculation output by saying, all right, the average is equal to sum divided by count, and then we can print the average is now let's try the code. If we run this code, we are asked to input a value. Okay, now we are inside the while loop. Once we input the value will be true for this condition, so the while loop will allow us in. It will do the summation, it will increase the count by 1, and now it's asking us for another input. So this will continue as long as we didn't put a negative value. But once we put a negative value, the code will exit once we put a negative value, it goes back into the while loop. The condition is false, then it goes out, and then it calculates the average, and then it prints the result. Thank you for watching, and see you next time.